Will you read Psalm 1 with me today? Blessed is the man who walks not in the counsel of the wicked, nor stands in the way of sinners, nor sits in the seat of scoffers. But his delight is in the law of the Lord, and on his law he meditates day and night. He is like a tree planted by streams of water that yields its fruit in its season, and its leaf does not wither. In all that he does, he prospers. The wicked are not so, but are like chaff that the wind drives away. Therefore the wicked will not stand in the judgment, nor sinners in the congregation of the righteous. For the Lord knows the way of the righteous, but the way of the wicked will perish.
Good morning, people. Welcome to Wingfoot. It's so good to be together with you. There we go. So good to be together with you this morning. My name is John. I'm the pastor here at Wingfoot. And every week we gather together to be renewed by the hope that we have in Jesus. That is why we are here. That is why we read from this word. That's why we talk about it. That's why we sing, because Jesus is our hope. Now, if you were with us back in January, I know it seems like a long time ago, but in January, when we headed into this year, we said that this year was going to be all about this idea of bless your block. That we believe that God is on a dynamic mission to bless the world through his presence. He's not just kicked back in an easy chair waiting for stuff to happen, that he is actually on a mission, and he's inviting us to join him in that. And so we said that this year we're going to talk about all about that. We're going to live into that mission through 5 everyday acts of mission. It was an acronym: BLESS, be prayerfully present, be on your block praying for your neighbors. Listen, ask good questions of your neighbors, listen to their story, eat with your neighbors. It is cookout weekend. Host a cookout or go to a cookout of your neighbor if you're invited and spend time with them, all right? And enjoy that time together. S is serve them in some kind of tangible way. And then lastly is to share your story or to share an invitation. If we do these 5 everyday things every day of the week or once a week, we will be engaging in the mission that Jesus is all about. And that's why we spend a couple weeks answering the questions that people have about church or about Christianity, because those are the questions that you're going to encounter as you spend time with your neighbors, or the questions that you might have if someone invited you to join us here this morning. And this week, we are kind of shifting gears a little bit. We're sort of pulling the foot off the gas pedal a little bit, and we're going to take a breather in some ways. Because as we've been talking about all of this stuff, it has also been a really hard, 18 months. Right? And over the course of the past 18 months, there has been a lot of really heavy stuff that we've had to deal with. A lot of really heavy stuff that our neighbors in our neighborhood have had to deal with. We've had neighbors and friends lose jobs. We've had neighbors and friends lose loved ones. We have wrestled with what to do and what not to do in the middle of this pandemic. We've also, as a country and as a city, been having these hard conversations and important conversations about racial justice. And so there's been all this stuff that is just really, really heavy and hard to work through. And so we're going to take a couple weeks, and we're going to talk through some of this heaviness. Because the beautiful thing about the Bible is the Bible doesn't think that we are just brains with a body. Right? If we were just brains with a body, the Bible would just give us bullet points. Say, here are the bullet points, here's the facts and figures that you need to know about life, that you need to know about God. The Bible understands that we are complex and complicated people. That we are not just thinking people, we are also feeling people. We have emotions, and those emotions matter, and the things that we're carrying and the things that we're feeling matter to God. And that's why the beautiful thing about the Bible is in the center of God's story, this story that's all about Jesus, in the center of that story is a songbook called the Psalms. And the songbook called the Psalms invites us to bring ourselves to God. Whatever it is that we're feeling, whatever it is that we are going through, to bring those feelings and those emotions to him and to express them and to wrestle with them and to find hope and truth in the middle of them. And so that's what we're going to do over the next couple weeks through a series that we're calling Mixtape. And we're calling it Mixtape because this songbook that's in the center of the Bible is really kind of like a greatest hits mixtape, like a greatest hits mixtape. If any great musical act or band at some point or another puts out a greatest hits album, right? Queen had one. Radiohead had one. Prince has a greatest hits album. Like any great artist, that's how you know you've made it if you put out a greatest hits album. It represents the best of their expression as an artist. The Psalms are the greatest hits album of the Bible. This mixtape of songs. In the center of the Bible are 148 songs that have been written by the people of God over the course of several generations and then collected for us so that we can know this is what it sounds like to follow God in the everyday stuff of your life. This is what it sounds like to follow God in the midst of the hard decisions that you're facing, in the midst of the family strife that you're dealing with, in the midst of the depression that you feel. This is what it sounds like to follow God. Now, I said 148. Some of you who are Bible scholars would say, hey, there's 150 Psalms, and you would be correct. But the thing about the Psalms is that the first two Psalms, Psalm 1 and Psalm 2, are original tracks on this mixtape. So Psalm 3 through 150 were written over the course of several hundred years and generations of people. But Psalm 1 and Psalm 2, this is the first time that people are hearing these Psalms. They are written to introduce you to the album that you're about to listen to. Psalm 1 introduces the central question of the Psalms, and Psalm 2 introduces the central character of the Psalms. And so today we're going to look at Psalm 1 to get an introduction to this album and what should we be listening to and hearing for. And then next week we're going to talk about Psalm 2 and the character of the Psalms. And so we're going to dive into Psalm 1 and get an introduction to this mixtape. So I want you to think I'm going to put my headphones in. I'm going to hit play, and we're going to listen to this album. A couple weeks ago, when we were talking about why we sing in church, Jordan made this statement. She said, everyone is singing to someone or something. Everyone is singing to someone or something. And what she was saying there is that your life, the things that you do, the things that you spend time on, the direction of your life, it's kind of like a song. You are singing and giving attention and focus to someone or something. And that's where Psalm 1 begins, with this question of who you're listening to. Notice what Psalm 1:1 says. It says, blessed is the man who walks not in the counsel of the wicked, nor stands in the way of sinners, nor sits in the seat of scoffers, but his delight is in the law of the Lord, and on his law he meditates day and night. Now that word meditation is really important to this part of the psalm. And when you hear that word meditation, I don't want you to think like a monk on a mountain, like just kind of humming silently. The meditation is this. When you listen to a song on your iPhone, right? You're listening to Spotify, and you hit repeat on that song, you're meditating on that song. That meditation is simply repeating this message over and over and over again, that this is the thing that I'm going to keep listening to and keep focusing on. So that's what it means to meditate, to hit repeat on that song. And so the psalm begins with this question of who is on repeat in your head and your heart. Whose voice, whose song is on repeat in your head or in your heart? Who are you listening to over and over and over again? Because what the psalm is saying is this: the songs you listen to shape the world that you live into. The songs you listen to shape the world you live into. Notice in verse 1 that there's a progression here. Right? First, it starts with this person listening to the counsel of the wicked. Right? The counsel would be like the advice. So he's just sort of entertaining the thoughts of the wicked. But then you'll notice the next thing is he's standing in the way. It's like he's now standing in the path. He's considering taking a step in the direction that these people have been advising him. And then the third thing that happens is he's now sitting. He has now established himself. He has now decided, this is where I sit. It all started with who he was listening to. And so the songs that you listen to shape the world that you live into. And by songs, I don't just mean music, although music could be counted in this. By songs, I simply mean the messages that you're listening to, the voices that you're listening to, the advice that you're listening to, the social media that you're listening to, the things that you listen to over and over and over again shape the world that you live into. For example, if you live here in our neighborhood and you are on the Goodyear Heights community Facebook page, and if that was the only thing that you knew about our neighborhood, you would think that our neighborhood was full of stray dogs in the afternoon and stray bullets in the evening, because that is what people talk about. They say, hey, my dog has gone missing. There's probably 10 missing dogs a day. And then there's always this question of, was that a firework or a gunshot? And if that was all that you knew, you would think that this neighborhood was full of dogs and violence. But if you talk to people who live here, or if you talk to people who are at Reservoir Park on Saturday or Sunday afternoon, or even if you talk to my neighbor across the street, right, they love this neighborhood. They would say that they feel good in this neighborhood. Yeah, there's some stuff that we have to deal with in the neighborhood, but if the song that you're listening to about the neighborhood is only that Facebook page, you would feel super anxious. But if you also listen to the voices of other people in the neighborhood, that's going to change the way that you view the neighborhood. So it's really important to listen to the songs that are being sung even here in our neighborhood. And that's the point that the psalmist is saying here is who or what is on repeat in your head or in your heart. What voices, what messages, what channels are on repeat. Because the songs that you listen to will shape the way that you live into the world. But then the psalm poses a challenge. And the challenge is this, that according to this psalm, there are only 2 songs that you can sing. There are only 2 songs that you can sing. You'll notice in the next verse of this psalm, the psalmist introduces us to a tree. And if you are relatively new to the Bible, you might miss the significance of this tree. So let me explain it for you. In the very first pages of this story, way back in Genesis 1, we find that there is a God who creates a good and perfect world. And this good and perfect world is full of life and love and justice and righteousness. Everything that you could want was in this world. But in the center of this creation, the same God who created, he placed one tree. And that tree was called the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. And he said to his creation, this whole world that I've created is full of life and flourishing, so enjoy it. But this one tree that represents the knowledge of good and evil, don't touch that one. So think about that. Of all the things that God created, there's one place that God said is his. And you might look at that and say, man, that's a really arbitrary kind of thing. Why would God even bother to do that? And I think this is what God was communicating to his creation, is that he created this world. And so if you want to know what is good and right and just and loving, you look to him. That this tree represents his authority, that he created this world. And so he has a good, just, and wise plan. And so if you want to know that plan, you come find him. You come talk to him. This is the first song that was sung in creation, the song all about God, his wisdom and his justice and his goodness. But in just a few chapters after that, in Genesis chapter 3, you find a second song is introduced. And this song is dissonant. Right? This song is kind of angsty. There's some underlying tension in this song. There's a character that's called the enemy, who appears to Adam and Eve, the first humans. And the first line of the song that he sings says, did God really say? He poses a question to them, and that question is like the counsel of the wicked in verse 1. That it poses this seed of doubt, this question in their head, and then the chorus of the song that he sings, he says, God doesn't have your best in mind. In fact, he is holding out on you. And if you take that tree, if you take the fruit from that tree, you will know good and evil. In other words, the song that he is inviting them to sing is a song that's all about them. That says, I get to decide what is right and wrong. I get to decide what is good and what is evil. It is the song that's all about me. And so the psalmist is saying, go back to that tree and let's consider the songs that you're singing, the song that you're meditating on. Are you singing the song about God, or are you singing the song that's all about yourself? It says that I'm the one in charge. But the psalmist is writing this several generations after that Genesis 3 story. And what he is saying is that every generation remixes these songs. Every generation remixes the song that's all about me in a slightly different way, but at its core, it is the same song. And I think there's 2 remixes that are playing around us all the time right now. The first remix is the happiness remix. And the happiness remix says that my happiness is the most important thing, and that I and I alone get to decide what makes me happy. Anyone else who disagrees with me or challenges me, they don't care about me, they don't love me. The most important thing is my happiness. I think the best example of this is from the movie Frozen. Now, some parents, maybe you just shuddered because you saw that movie so many times, you have like Frozen issues. But in the movie Frozen, Elsa, the main character, she, at her youth, gets this skill, right? She's able to freeze things with her hands. Now, her whole life, she's told to suppress this because it causes issues. It doesn't fit in her community. And so eventually she gets to this point where she decides she doesn't want to suppress that. She doesn't want to hide it. She wants to express it. And so she sings this song, Let It Go. And we could probably all sing this song together if we wanted to. But in the song, Let It Go, she is climbing up this mountain, leaving her community behind, saying, let it go. Let it go. You can't hold me back anymore. And then there's a line that she sings in the song. She says, no right, no wrong, no rules for me. I'm free. And as she sings that, she creates this huge ice castle. In effect, what she's doing is she's singing the song of Genesis 3 that says that I want my happiness. I want to do what only I decide to do, and here's my kingdom where I am in charge. She's singing the happiness remix. It says there's no right, no wrong. There's no rules for me. I'm free to decide how I want to live. But here's the problem with the happiness remix. If you sing it, if you believe it, if you live into it, you're going to find two things are true. The first thing is this: you're going to limit your ability to love others. You're going to limit your ability to love others. That's what Elsa finds, is she's in this kingdom of isolation, and yet she isolates herself from the very people who care about her. And if you believe the happiness remix, you're going to say, anyone who disagrees with me, even if they care about me, but if they disagree with me, they hate me, and so I'm going to cut myself off from them. I'm going to isolate myself from them. So you're going to limit your ability to love people, especially if they disagree with you. But the second thing, and this is the counterintuitive thing, is that if you sing the happiness remix, you're going to limit your ability to love yourself. Because the happiness remix poses that we can love ourselves, and we alone know how best to love ourselves. But the reality is that if you're singing the happiness remix that says this is all about me, you have nothing to ground yourself in. Right? That's the psalm describes this song as chaff. Chaff is like dried up wheat. It's got nothing to hold it down. It's got no foundation that it's digging into. And so when the wind comes or a storm comes, it blows away. And if you are trusting in yourself to be happy, you have nothing to ground yourself in. Because there's going to be some stuff in your life that you're going to have to deal with. Maybe some hard things that you're going to have to confront. Maybe some things in your past. And if you're just rooting yourself in yourself, you're going to get lost in yourself. You're going to have nothing in yourself to give you a compass, to give you a direction. And so you're going to limit your ability to confront the things in you that you need to confront. And so the happiness remix, as much as it poses that it's going to leave you happy, it will leave you rootless and restless. The second remix that we are singing loud and proud today is the opinion remix. And the opinion remix says this, that I know what's right and everyone else around me is an idiot. Right? We are singing this song all over the place. And the opinion remix says, I've decided what is right, and no one can change my mind. And the dangerous thing about this is that we can find people on the internet to agree with us. And so we find an article, or we find a news channel, or we find a YouTuber, and we say, look, they agree with my opinion. I'm right, you're wrong, and you're also an idiot. Right? We sing this song all the time. And it's getting mixed in with our politics, and so we're polarized. But then the dangerous thing happens is we sing the opinion remix, and then we go to the Bible, and we find a verse taken out of context that seems to agree with us, and then we make Jesus about our opinions rather than shaping our opinions around Jesus. And so we then say, well, God is on my side, and so here's what God looks like to me. And so if you believe your opinion and it disagrees with me, you're not only against me, you're against God. All the while, we're singing the song that's about me and my opinions. And it's no wonder that people don't know what Jesus was all about, because we're singing these songs that aren't about him, they're about us. And so the invitation of the psalm is to consider who or what is on repeat in your head. What song are you listening to? What song are you remixing in your head and your heart? And so the psalm says, don't sing the song about yourself. Instead, come back to this tree and sing the song about God. You notice in verse 2, he presents this picture of this one who delights in the law of the Lord, and he meditates on it day and night. Now, on first read, that sounds really boring, right? If I have a choice between meditating on my happiness or meditating on a book of laws, I will choose my happiness every day. But that word law actually means Torah. And Torah in that day, when he wrote this psalm, represented the whole teachings of God. It started in Genesis, and it continued on through the books of the Bible to the very point where this guy now was. He's saying, go back to the beginning of that story and meditate on the whole story, beginning to end. Play it on repeat over and over and over again. Listen to it over and over and over again. Come back to Genesis 1 and Genesis 2 and Genesis 3, because here's what will happen. Is as you continue to read this story and listen to this story over and over and over again, you're going to find that the God who first sang that song in the garden never stopped singing that song. That the God of Genesis 1 continued to pursue us while we were singing a different song. He continued to chase us down and to sing his song of his goodness and his love and his justice, and he sang it all the way to the point where Jesus introduces the chorus. And the chorus of God's song is that he is willing to die to show you the depths of his love. And on a different tree, Jesus hangs on a cross and breathes his last breath, singing the last and final chorus of the song, "It is finished. Now come to my love. Come, return and sing this song again. That this is the song that God is singing throughout the whole of the Bible, is that he has loved us in Jesus, and that if you know him, you can be made new. And when you are made new, you are given a new song to sing. If you meditate on this story, that is what you will find, is that this is the heart of the God who first sang that song in the garden. But you see, I think our approach to the Bible limits our ability to hear that song. It limits our ability to really understand and to meditate and to hit repeat on that song. You see, I think we have two insufficient approaches to this story, two insufficient approaches to hearing the song of God. The first is this. It's saying, I've heard all about it. I've heard all about it. And this might be you if you grew up maybe going to Sunday school as a kid, and then kind of you got into like high school, maybe college, and you kind of left it for a while, and you maybe have this attitude that says, I've heard it all before, right? I've heard the story. I've heard all about it. I've heard the reviews. I've got a podcast or a book or an article that tells me about what the Bible says, but you yourself are not listening to it. Instead, you're reading the reviews about it. That's not meditating on the word. And what you will find is that as you read this story, listening for that song, this story will start to transform you from the inside out. And so if you're here and you're saying, I've heard all about it, but you're not actually listening to the story, you're not going to understand the heart of this God who sings this song. So the invitation of this psalm to you is to read the story, to listen to the story, to put the headphones in and to press play on God's song. But the other insufficient approach is to say, I've heard it all before. I've heard it all before. And this is what often happens if you've been in church or been a Christian for a little while, is you feel like you've heard this story before. You've heard the sermons before. You've read the books before. You've sat in the Bible studies before. And so what happens after a time is you get bored with this, and then you start reading books about the Bible, and you stop reading the Bible. And so now you're reading people's opinions about the Bible, or worse, you start looking in the Bible for all the little bits and pieces that you can argue with people about because you're bored with it. Rather than meditating on it, you now say, I've heard it all before. There's nothing new or interesting here. If you do that, you're not meditating on it. You're not going to experience the transforming power of this. Because meditation is coming back to the story over and over and over again. And the picture of the psalm is this, that as you do this, you will become like this tree planted by streams of water that in season bears fruit. And that phrase, in season, is really important. This weekend is the weekend to plant your garden, or so my wife has told me. That if you are a gardener, this is the weekend you want to put your seeds in the ground because the time is right, the sun is right, it's not going to frost, hopefully, right? But the idea of this psalm is this, is that we often overestimate what the Bible's going to do in a day, but we underestimate what it's going to do in a year. We overestimate what it's going to do in a day, and we underestimate what it's going to do in a year. It's kind of like if you were to go out to your garden this afternoon and put a seed in the ground. Let's say you plant cucumber. You plant a cucumber, right? You put the seed in the ground, and you go to bed, and you wake up Monday morning, you look out and say, where's my cucumber? That's not how seeds work. That's not how growth works. And the psalmist is saying that as you meditate on this song, in season, it will bear fruit. Which means that the first time you read the Bible, or maybe the 10th time you read the Bible, like it may not feel like anything's happening. But that word is bearing fruit in season over the period of time. I'll give you an example of this in my life. A couple years ago, I was facing some really big decisions. I was considering whether I was going to change a career, whether we were going to move. There was just a lot of things up in the air. And that same year, I had also committed to read through the Bible in a year, which is kind of like a thing that Christians flex on in January, where they're like, man, I'm going to read through the Bible in a year. It's a lot of reading. And I've tried several other times, and I always quit in Numbers, because Numbers is the dry season. But I was reading this story every day, just a couple of chapters a day, and I was in the story of Abraham in Genesis. And at the same time, I was facing these really big decisions. They were coming for me, and I felt the weight of them, and I was anxious about it. But I started to hear God's song in this story a little bit differently. I was in a different season of life. And so I started to realize that as I was facing these decisions, I was listening to God's song, and I realized that the beat of God's song is to send people out. To send people out into places that maybe they don't know how things are going to go. Maybe they don't know exactly how it's going to turn out. But when he says to Abraham, go into a land I'm going to show you, I was hearing that's the beat of God's song. And so I wasn't saying that I am Abraham, and therefore what God is saying to Abraham, he's saying to me. I also couldn't point you to a verse that said, here's John, this is what you're supposed to do. But I started to hear the song and say, God's song is to send people out. And so if I'm going to be in God's story, listening to God's song, I have to follow the rhythm of his song. And so I need to take a step of trust where I don't really know how it's going to end. Now, I had heard that story 100 times, but that time that I was listening to it, I heard it differently because I was in a different season. And this is what happens when you meditate, when you listen to the story of God over and over and over again, is that whatever season of life you're in, God is going to use that song to meet you right where you are. In fact, we could even say that the Psalms themselves are that fruit, right? That the Psalms that we're about to listen to, the songs that we're about to listen to, are the fruit of someone who is reading the story of God in the midst of the hard stuff, the betrayal, the anger, the depression, and they're looking at that story and they're writing a psalm. They're saying, God, help me make sense of this. I know what you've done in the past. Now help me make sense of this. And so they write, here's where I am, God. You see, it could be that God has a psalm that he wants to write in your heart this summer. A psalm that says, God, here's where I am. I know your story. I've listened to your song. Now help me make sense of where I am right now. And so out of that comes this fruit of a psalm that says, God, help me. God, I love you. God, I need you. God, help me make sense. That is what the Psalms are. It's someone meditating on this story and remixing on it with a song about who God is in their life. But that only can happen as you are hitting repeat on his song, as you are listening to his song over and over and over again. And the promise is, if you do this, you will be planted in the love of God. And that whatever season comes, nothing will be able to uproot you from that. But first, you have to root in this song. And that's what we're going to do together this summer. Let me pray for us. God, we are, in a sense, standing at that tree. And that tree where you invite us to sing a song, whether it's the song about you or the song that's about us. God, we have listened to the remix of the song of the enemy that says, God, you can't be trusted. God, I need to decide for myself. God, we're coming here back to that tree to say, we need to sing your song, God. God, there are voices that we are listening to, songs and messages that we are listening to that are pulling us away from you. Would you help us to hear your song anew, to sing your song anew, to be planted at that tree, to be rooted in the love of Jesus. God, wherever we are coming from this morning, whether that's joy or sorrow, strength or heartache, God, there is a psalm that you want to write in our hearts this summer. And as we listen to your story, as we center on your song, would you remind us that you can be trusted, that you are good, that no matter what season of life we're in, that you have promised to plant us in your love through Jesus. Would you do that work in our hearts this morning? We pray this in his strong name. Amen.